Jake Murphy had always thought his biggest career mistake was microwaving fish in the office break room. Turns out, accepting a job as Dragon Commander without reading the fine print was significantly worse. The recruitment ad had been vague. Seeking dynamic leader for unique interstellar opportunity. Excellent benefits. Dragon experience preferred but not required. Jake figured they meant the software company Dragon Systems. He was wrong. Very, very wrong. Standing on the crystalline platform of Zephyria Prime, Jake watched his shuttle disappear into the star-streaked void and wondered if his life insurance covered death by disappointed alien dragon. The welcoming committee consisted of one very large, very unimpressed reptilian creature whose scales shimmered like oil on water. So Jake said, adjusting his tie nervously, "I'm here about the commander position?" The dragon's eyes, each the size of dinner plates, fixed on him with the enthusiasm of someone discovering gum on their shoe. "You are the human," it said telepathically, the words appearing directly in Jake's mind with all the warmth of a tax audit. "I am Elder Vextar. I was hoping you would be taller." "I get that a lot," Jake replied, then immediately regretted it. This was not the time for self-deprecating humor. Vextar's snort produced a small cloud of smoke that made Jake's eyes water. "The Council of Elders believes you can unite our fractured clans. I believe you are cosmically irrelevant." Jake blinked. "Well, that's direct. Your species has existed for what? A few million years? We have been masters of space travel since before your planet finished cooling. You eat processed food from plastic containers. We subsist on pure energy and the occasional supernova. What exactly do you bring to this arrangement?" Jake opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. What did he bring? His greatest accomplishment was reorganizing the quarterly reports filing system. He'd been middle management at a company that made software for other companies that made software for printers. "I have a master's in business administration," he offered weakly. Vextar's laugh was like rocks falling down a mountain. "Marvelous. We have been waiting 3 centuries for proper leadership, and the universe sends us a human with a degree in corporate bureaucracy." The dragon began walking toward a massive crystalline structure that Jake assumed was either a palace or a very fancy prison. Given his luck, probably both. "The others are eager to meet you," Vextar continued, his mental voice dripping with sarcasm. "Kira Lin thinks you might surprise us. This wants to see if you taste like chicken. And Nixara, well, Nixara is a special case." "Special how?" "You will see. If you survive the introductions." Jake followed the dragon through corridors that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Somewhere in the distance he could hear what sounded like a conference room argument, except the voices were telepathic and occasionally punctuated by small explosions. "One question," Jake said, jogging to keep up with Vextar's massive strides. "Why exactly did you choose a human? I mean, surely there are other species with better qualifications?" Vextar paused, turning his great head toward Jake. "Because, little human, we have tried everything else. We have tried strength, we have tried wisdom, we have tried democracy. Nothing works. The council decided we needed someone so utterly foreign to our nature that perhaps their very alienness might shock us into cooperation. And if that doesn't work, then we eat you and try the next species on the list. I believe the Centaurians are next." Jake swallowed hard. Great. No pressure. As they approached the massive doors to what Jake assumed was the council chamber, Vextar stopped and fixed him with one enormous eye. "A word of advice, human. Do not show fear. Do not show weakness. And whatever you do, do not attempt to pet anyone. The last ambassador who tried that lost 3 fingers." "Noted," Jake said, wondering if it was too late to update his resume. The doors opened with a sound like crystalline wind chimes, and Jake Murphy, former middle manager and current Dragon Commander, walked into what he was pretty sure would be the shortest leadership tenure in galactic history. The council chamber was less majestic throne room and more corporate boardroom designed by someone who'd only heard boardrooms described by a fever dream. 12 dragons arranged themselves around a crystalline table that probably cost more than Jake's entire planet's GDP. "Behold," Vextar announced with all the enthusiasm of a funeral director, "your new commander." The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for awkward elevator rides and failed marriage proposals. Jake stood there, acutely aware that he was probably the only thing in the room that wouldn't survive being sneezed on. A dragon with silver-blue scales that looked like captured starlight leaned forward. "I am Kira Lynn the Skeptical," she said, her mental voice crisp and analytical. "I have studied your species extensively. You are short-lived, fragile, and prone to making decisions based on emotional impulses rather than logical analysis." "That's accurate," Jake admitted. "You also show remarkable adaptability, innovative problem-solving skills, and an unusual capacity for empathy across species barriers," Kira Lynn continued. "These traits may prove valuable." A massive red dragon with scars crisscrossing his hide snorted flame. "This the bloodthirsty finds this human disappointing. Where are the fangs? The claws? How does one command respect without the ability to properly disembowel one's enemies?" "I use passive-aggressive emails," Jake said before he could stop himself. This looked confused. "Explain this weapon." "It's not really a weapon, it's more of a—" "Never mind." Jake rubbed his temples. "Look, I know I'm not what you expected. I'm not even what I expected. But I'm here, and apparently you need help. So maybe we can figure this out together?" "Together?" Vextar's laugh was like grinding stone. "Human, you do not understand. We are not a democracy. We are not a committee. We are dragons. We follow strength, and you have the physical presence of a malnourished sparrow." "But that's exactly why it might work," said a voice from the shadows. A dragon Jake hadn't noticed before stepped into the light. Her scales were deep purple, almost black, and when she moved, she seemed to flow like liquid shadow. "I am Zara Neth the Ancient. I have lived for 15,000 years, and I have seen strength fail us repeatedly." "Zara Neth speaks wisdom," Kira Lynn said. "Our society has been without proper leadership for 3 centuries precisely because we cannot agree on who is strongest. Each clan believes their champion should lead. Which is why we fight." This growled. "As is proper." "No," Zara Neth said firmly. "Which is why we stagnate. While we argue about dominance, our enemies grow stronger. The Devourers mass at our borders. The trade routes suffer from our political instability. Our young dragons leave for other systems because they see no future here." Jake listened to this exchange with growing understanding. "So you're not looking for someone to dominate the dragons. You're looking for someone the dragons won't feel compelled to challenge." "Precisely," Kira Lynn said. "A human cannot threaten our hierarchy, because a human cannot truly join it. You exist outside our power structure." "Like a referee," Jake said, warming to the idea. "I'm not playing the game, I'm just making sure everyone follows the rules." "Rules?" This looked skeptical. "What rules?" "That's something we'll have to work out together," Jake said. "But first, I should probably meet everyone who's going to be part of this process." "There is one dragon you have not yet met," Vextar said, his mental voice carrying an odd note of warning. "Nyxara the Shadowblade. She is difficult." "Difficult how?" "She has killed more enemies than any dragon in our history," Zara Neth explained. "She is faster than thought, deadlier than a collapsing star, and has never shown deference to any leader. She also has not spoken to anyone in 50 years, Kira Lynn added. She attends council meetings but never contributes. She follows orders but never acknowledges authority. And she is absolutely essential to our defense," this said grudgingly. "Without Nyxara, we would have fallen to the Devourers decades ago." Jake nodded slowly. "So I need to somehow gain the respect of an antisocial super-soldier dragon who hasn't talked to anyone since before I was born." "Essentially, yes," Vextar said. "No pressure?" "Right," Jake said, loosening his tie. "When do I meet her?" The council chamber suddenly felt colder, and Jake realized that all 12 dragons were looking at something behind him. He turned around and found himself staring at a pair of eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian. The dragon attached to those eyes was smaller than the others, sleeker, with scales so dark they seemed to absorb light. "Hello, Zephyria," Jake said, proud that his voice only cracked a little. The dragon regarded him silently for a long moment, then did something that made every other dragon in the room tense. She smiled, revealing teeth like crystallized moonlight. "Hello, little commander," she said, her mental voice like silk over steel. "I have been waiting to meet you." Zephyria moved like liquid shadow given form, circling Jake with the predatory grace of something that had never been prey. The other dragons watched this display with the fascination of witnesses to a traffic accident in slow motion. "You are smaller than I expected," she said, her telepathic voice carrying amusement rather than disappointment. "And you smell of fear and coffee." "The coffee's not my fault," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "The shuttle food was terrible." Humor in the face of death, Zephyria mused, still circling. "Interesting. Most beings either flee or attempt to establish dominance when I approach. You do neither." "Well, fleeing seems pointless since you're faster than me, and establishing dominance seems stupid since you could probably disintegrate me with a thought." "I could," she agreed cheerfully. "Would you like to see?" "Not particularly." Zephyria stopped directly in front of him, lowering her head until her obsidian eyes were level with his. Jake could feel heat radiating from her scales, could smell ozone and something that might have been starfire. "The others believe you are weak," she said conversationally. "They think your lack of fangs and claws makes you unsuitable for leadership." "They're probably right," Jake said. "I've never led anything more dangerous than a quarterly budget meeting. And yet here you are, speaking calmly to the most feared dragon in the galaxy, while your predecessors wet themselves and begged for mercy." "My predecessors?" "Oh yes," Zephyria said, settling onto her haunches with fluid grace. "You are the 7th human to apply for this position. The first 6, well, let us say they did not make it past the interview process." Jake felt his stomach drop. What happened to them? "Nothing permanent," Vextar interjected quickly. "They simply declined to continue the application process." "After meeting me," Zephyria added with obvious satisfaction, "I have a reputation for being somewhat intimidating." "Somewhat," Jake repeated weakly. "I find it refreshing that you are not immediately demanding I bow to your authority," Zephyria continued. "The last candidate, a human named Marcus something, spent 10 minutes explaining why his military experience made him naturally suited to command dragons. I may have accidentally singed his eyebrows." "Accidentally?" "Well, mostly accidentally." Jake looked around the room at the other dragons, all of whom were watching this exchange with expressions ranging from fascination to concern to what might have been popcorn-eating anticipation. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said to Zephyria. "Why are you the only one who seems, I don't know, not completely dismissive of me?" Zephyria tilted her head, considering. "Because you are the first potential leader who has not tried to impress me. You have not boasted of your strength or your achievements. You have not demanded respect or threatened consequences." "I'm not really in a position to threaten anyone," Jake pointed out. "Exactly," Zephyria said, and there was something like approval in her mental voice. "You understand your limitations. Most beings in positions of power do not." "So what happens now?" Jake asked. "Do I get the job, or do you accidentally singe my eyebrows too?" "That depends," Zephyria said, rising to her full height. "Are you prepared to prove that you can lead dragons without dominating them?" "I'm prepared to try," Jake said. "Though I should probably warn you, I have no idea what I'm doing." "Honesty," Zephyria said, and Jake could have sworn she was pleased. Another unusual trait in a leader. "The Devourers will not wait for you to learn on the job," this interjected. "They mass at our borders even now." "The Devourers?" Jake asked. "Our ancient enemy," Kira Lynn explained. They consume entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. We have held them at bay for millennia, but our fractured leadership has made our defenses less effective. Jake nodded, processing this information. So I need to unite the dragon clans, organize a defense against cosmic locusts, and do it all without actually being able to order anyone around. Essentially, yes, Vextar said dryly. And if I fail? Then we all die, Nyx Era said matter-of-factly. But do not worry, little commander. Death is quite peaceful once you stop struggling. Jake stared at her. That's not as reassuring as you might think. I was not attempting to be reassuring, Nyx Era replied. I was being honest. I thought you appreciated honesty. I do, but maybe we could aim for honest and slightly less terrifying? I will consider it, Nyx Era said, and Jake was almost certain she was laughing at him. In the meantime, you should probably figure out how to save us all. Right, Jake said, loosening his tie further. No pressure. As the council session continued, Jake found himself watching Nyx Era out of the corner of his eye. Unlike the other dragons, who postured and argued and tried to establish dominance through volume and flame, she simply listened. And when she looked at him, he didn't see the dismissive skepticism he got from the others. He saw something that looked almost like curiosity. It was probably the most encouraging thing that had happened to him since he'd arrived, which, given that he was surrounded by giant telepathic dragons discussing the end of civilization, was a pretty low bar. But it was something. 3 days into his tenure as Dragon Commander, Jake had learned several important things. First, dragon politics made human politics look like a kindergarten playground dispute. Second, military strategy was significantly more complex when your troops could fly at the speed of light but refused to follow orders from anyone they hadn't personally fought. Third, the Devourers were not, in fact, cosmic locusts. They were much, much worse. Jake stood in the war room, staring at a holographic display that showed the Devourer fleet approaching like a swarm of mechanical hornets. Each ship was roughly the size of a small moon and bristled with weapons that could crack planets like eggs. The outer colonies report complete communication blackout, Kira Lynn announced, her mental voice tight with concern. Theta Station, Meridian Outpost, and the mining facilities at Zerion 7. All silent. They do not simply destroy, this growled. They consume. They take the energy of entire worlds and add it to their own power. Each victory makes them stronger. How long until they reach the core worlds? Jake asked. Yet. 48 hours, Vextar replied grimly. Perhaps less if they continue to accelerate. Jake nodded, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. What's our current defensive capability? Fragmented, Zara Neth said. The Fire Clan refuses to coordinate with the Shadow Clan. The Crystal Clan insists their territory be defended first. The Storm Clan claims the others are cowards for not attacking immediately. So we have the military strength to repel the invasion, but we're too busy arguing to actually use it. Essentially, yes, Kira Lynn confirmed. Jake rubbed his temples. Right. So I need to convince a dozen different dragon clans to work together, despite centuries of territorial disputes, in the next 48 hours. 47 hours and 36 minutes, Vextar corrected helpfully. Thanks, that's much better. Jake began pacing, a habit that had served him well during quarterly budget crises but felt somewhat inadequate in the face of galactic annihilation. The assembled dragons watched him with expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. What if we don't try to make them work together? He said suddenly. Explain, Kira Lynn said. Instead of trying to coordinate one big battle plan, what if we let each clan do what they do best? The Fire Clan likes direct assault, right? Let them hit the Devourers head on. The Shadow Clan prefers stealth and infiltration. They can strike at the command ships. The Crystal Clan has the best defensive capabilities. They guard the core worlds. That is not a strategy, this said dismissively. That is chaos. No, that's asymmetric warfare, Jake replied. The Devourers are expecting us to meet them with traditional military formation. They've probably fought dozens of species who tried to match them ship for ship, formation for formation. But what if we don't fight like dragons are supposed to fight? What if we fight like humans? And how do humans fight? Zaraneth asked, sounding genuinely curious. Dirty, Jake said with a grin. We cheat. We use every advantage we can think of, and when we run out of advantages, we make new ones. Elaborate, Vextar said. Jake moved to the holographic display, pointing at various formations. The Devourers travel in tight convoy formation because it's efficient and provides maximum firepower concentration. But it also makes them vulnerable to coordinated hit and run attacks. We don't meet them head-on. We hit them from 12 different directions at once, each clan using their unique abilities. The Fire Clan creates a distraction with a frontal assault, Kirillin said slowly, following his logic, while the Shadow Clan infiltrates their rear guard. The Crystal Clan uses their defensive abilities to create mobile shields for the strike teams, Zaraneth added. And the Storm Clan, they could disrupt the Devourers' communication networks. Exactly, Jake said. We don't fight as one army. We fight as 12 different armies, each doing what they do best, but all working toward the same goal. It is unconventional, this admitted grudgingly. But it might work. It will work, said a voice from the shadows. Nyxara stepped into the light, her dark scales gleaming. Because the human thinks like prey that has learned to hunt. Is that a compliment? Jake asked. It is an observation. Nyxara replied. Prey animals that survive to become predators are the most dangerous creatures in the universe. They combine the survival instincts of the hunted with the killing skills of the hunter. So you support the plan? Vextar asked, sounding surprised. I support the planner, Nyxara said, and without warning she moved to where Jake was standing and settled down beside him. Not just beside him, but actually curled around him, her sleek form forming a protective semicircle. The war room fell completely silent. Nyxara, Vextar said carefully, what are you doing? I am demonstrating trust, she replied calmly. In dragon culture, to rest beside another is to show absolute confidence in their protection and judgment. But you never, Kirillin began. I never found anyone worthy of such trust, Nyxara said. Until now. Jake found himself with a lap full of deadly alien dragon, acutely aware that he was probably the first human in history to be used as a pillow by something that could atomize a small city. Nyxara's scales were warm against his legs, and he could feel a subtle vibration that might have been purring. This is unprecedented, Zaraneth said, sounding awed. This is terrifying, this muttered. This is exactly what we need, Kirillin said firmly. If Nyxara the Shadowblade trusts the human's judgment, then perhaps we should as well. You have my support, Zaraneth said. And mine, Kirillin added. The Fire Clan will follow, this said grudgingly. But if this plan fails, human, you will face my personal displeasure. I'll add it to the list, Jake said, trying to ignore the warm, deadly weight in his lap. Right after galactic annihilation and disappointing the entire dragon species. At least you have your priorities straight, Nyxara said, and Jake was certain she was laughing at him. But as the other dragons began coordinating their clans for the battle ahead, Jake realized something important had just happened. He'd gotten them to work together, not through strength or intimidation or political maneuvering, but by giving them a plan that let them be themselves while still serving the greater good. Maybe this dragon commander thing wasn't entirely hopeless after all. The warm weight in his lap shifted slightly, and Nyxara looked up at him with those obsidian eyes. Do not become overconfident, little commander, she said softly. The hard part is just beginning. Great, Jake said. I was starting to think this was too easy. I told you I would consider being less terrifying, Nyxara replied. I did not say I would succeed. The battle began at dawn, which was purely symbolic since they were fighting in the vacuum of space, where dawn was more of a philosophical concept than an actual event. But Jake had learned that dragons were surprisingly sentimental about dramatic timing. From the command center aboard the flagship Starfire, Jake watched the tactical display with the sort of focused terror that came from knowing that literally billions of lives depended on whether his completely untested strategy would work against an enemy he'd only learned about 3 days ago. Fire Clan reports ready for frontal assault, Kira Lynn announced, her mental voice crisp and professional. Shadow Clan in position for infiltration strike, Zara Neth added. Crystal Clan defensive formations established, Vextar reported. And Storm Clan is, well, they are doing something that involves a lot of electromagnetic interference and what appears to be interpretive dance, this said, sounding confused. That's probably their communication disruption protocol, Jake said, hoping he sounded more confident than he felt. Everyone ready? Ready came the chorus of dragon voices. Jake looked down at Nyx Era, who had taken up her now customary position curled around his command chair. She'd explained that it was a tactical necessity, providing him with protection while demonstrating her continued support to the other dragons. Jake suspected she also just liked having a comfortable place to nap during meetings. What do you think? He asked her quietly. I think you are about to discover whether humans are as clever as they believe themselves to be, she replied, her mental voice carrying gentle amusement. Or whether the universe has a sense of humor. That's reassuring. I am still working on the reassurance thing. The Devourer fleet appeared on the display like a swarm of mechanical death, each ship bristling with weapons that could level continents. They moved in perfect formation, a testament to the cold efficiency that had allowed them to consume entire star systems. They are beautiful in their way, Nyx Era observed, like a perfectly designed killing machine. You have a very disturbing sense of aesthetics, Jake said. I appreciate efficiency. It is why I find you interesting. I'm efficient? You are the opposite of efficient. You are chaotic, unpredictable, and you make decisions based on intuition rather than calculation. It is deeply disturbing to anyone who values order. And that's good? It is what we need. Jake watched the tactical display as the Devourer fleet approached the outer defensive perimeter. Any moment now, they would expect the dragons to meet them in traditional formation, ship against ship, strength against strength. All units, Jake said, his voice carrying across the communication network to every dragon in the fleet. Execute Operation Cosmic Chaos. He'd wanted to call it something more dignified, but the dragons had voted on the name, and apparently they had a sense of humor after all. The Fire Clan struck first, 36 red-scaled dragons in full battle form screaming out of the sun in a frontal assault that should have been suicide. The Devourers responded exactly as expected, concentrating their fire on the obvious threat while their formation tightened to repel the attack. Which was exactly when the Shadow Clan materialized inside their formation. Shadow Clan reports successful infiltration, Zaraneth announced, beginning surgical strikes on command vessels. Fire Clan, break off and regroup, Jake ordered. You've done your job. The frontal assault peeled away just as the Crystal Clan's defensive formations came online, projecting protective barriers around the strike teams. The Storm Clan's electromagnetic interference kicked in, turning the Devourers' perfect coordination into confused chaos. It is working, this said, sounding surprised. They are confused. They are reacting instead of acting, Kira Lynn observed. This is not how they are accustomed to fighting. Jake watched the tactical display with growing excitement. The Devourer fleet was breaking apart, individual ships trying to respond to threats coming from every direction at once. They were used to overwhelming their enemies with superior firepower and organization, but Jake's plan denied them both advantages. Nyx Era, he said quietly, it's your turn. I was wondering when you would ask, she replied, rising from her position around his chair. What do you need? I need you to do what you do best. Nyxaria's laugh was like crystalline wind chimes. Finally, a simple request. She launched herself from the flagship's fighter bay, her form shifting from solid matter to something that moved like liquid darkness. Jake watched her on the tactical display as she wove through the battlefield, too fast and too small for the Devourers' weapons to track. "What is she doing?" Vextar asked. "Ending the battle," Jake said. Nyxaria reached the Devourer command ship, a massive vessel that coordinated the movements of the entire fleet. For a moment she simply circled it, a tiny shadow against its bulk. Then she disappeared inside it. "How did this began?" "Phase shifting," Jake said. "She can exist partially outside normal space. Makes her effectively intangible when she needs to be." "You knew she could do this?" "I asked her about her capabilities during the planning session. She's been holding back because no one ever asked her to do anything creative." The Devourer command ship went dark. Then its weapons turned on the rest of the fleet. "The Devourers are firing on each other," Kira Lynn reported, her mental voice filled with amazement. "Nyxaria has taken control of their command ship," Jake explained. "Now she's using their own coordination protocols against them." The battle, which should have lasted hours and cost thousands of lives, was over in minutes. The Devourer fleet, thrown into chaos by the loss of their command structure and the Dragon's unconventional tactics, began to retreat. "Should we pursue?" This asked. "No," Jake said. "We've accomplished our objective. They'll think twice before attacking Dragon space again." "The human is wise," Zara Neth observed. "Victory in battle is valuable, but victory that prevents future battles is priceless." Nyxaria reappeared in the fighter bay, her form solidifying as she returned to normal space. She looked exactly as she had before, except for what might have been a satisfied expression. "The command ship has been neutralized," she reported. "The Devourers are retreating to their own territory." "How many casualties?" Jake asked. "Minimal. The Fire Clan lost 3 fighters to enemy fire, but the pilots ejected safely. The Shadow Clan reports 0 losses. The Crystal and Storm clans were never in direct combat." Jake felt a tension he hadn't realized he was carrying leave his shoulders. "We did it." "You did it," Nyxaria corrected, settling back into her position around his chair. "You took 12 fractured clans and made them into a unified force without forcing them to give up their individual strengths. I just gave them a plan that let them be themselves." "Exactly," she said, and there was something like pride in her mental voice. "You understood that unity does not require uniformity." "Is that a dragon saying?" "It is now." Jake looked around the command center at the assembled dragons. They were all looking at him with something that might have been respect, which was a significant improvement over the barely concealed hostility he'd been getting 3 days ago. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now," Vextar said, "you learn to be a proper dragon commander." "I thought I just did." "You learn to win a battle," Kira Lynn corrected. "Now you must learn to win a peace, which is significantly more difficult." Nyxaria added helpfully. Jake leaned back in his chair, feeling the warm weight of the galaxy's deadliest dragon curled around him like a protective barrier. "Of course it is." "Do not worry, little commander," Nyxaria said, and Jake could swear she was purring. "I will help you." "That's actually really reassuring. I told you I was working on it." 6 months later, Jake Murphy sat in what the dragons insisted on calling his throne room, but which he'd furnished with a comfortable recliner, a coffee maker, and a spectacular view of the Zephyrrian homeworld's 3 moons. It was, he reflected, probably the most comfortable seat of power in the known galaxy. It was also currently occupied by both him and Nyxaria, who had taken to using him as a combination pillow, heat source, and security blanket. The arrangement had caused quite a stir in galactic diplomatic circles. "The Centaurian ambassador is here for the trade negotiations," Kira Lynn announced, her mental voice carrying the slight amusement that had become her default tone when dealing with Jake's unconventional leadership style. Send him in, Jake said, scratching behind Nyx Ra's auditory ridges. She'd discovered that humans gave excellent ear scratches and had become shamelessly addicted to them. The Centaurian ambassador entered with the nervous energy of someone who'd been briefed on the situation but still found it difficult to believe. He was a tall, crystalline being who communicated through harmonic resonance and was, according to his file, considered one of the galaxy's most skilled diplomats. Ambassador Resonance, welcome to Zephyria, Jake said, gesturing to the chair across from his recliner. Please have a seat. The ambassador's harmonic tones conveyed polite greeting, while his body language suggested he was trying very hard not to stare at the deadly alien dragon, using the human leader as his furniture. Commander Murphy, he said, his voice like crystal wind chimes, I must confess, your unusual approach to leadership has generated considerable interest in diplomatic circles. I bet it has, Jake said. Coffee? I thank you, but Centaurians do not consume liquid nutrients. More for me, then. Jake took a sip from his mug, which was decorated with world's okayest dragon commander in several galactic languages. It had been a gift from this, who'd apparently developed a sense of humor. The trade proposal looked straightforward, Jake continued. Crystal matrix technology in exchange for access to our outer mining colonies. The dragons are fine with it, assuming you can guarantee the crystals won't be used for weapons. Of course, the ambassador said, but I must ask, is it true that you unified the dragon clans without conquering them? Conquering seemed like a lot of work, Jake said. Plus, it's hard to conquer people who can disintegrate you with their mind. But the report suggests that you have achieved something that the greatest military minds in the galaxy considered impossible. Jake shrugged. I just asked them what they wanted to do and then figured out how to let them do it while still working together. That is, remarkably simple. Simple ideas usually are. It's the execution that gets complicated. The ambassador's harmonic tones shifted to something that might have been curiosity. And the dragon, forgive me, but she is Nyx Ra the Shadowblade, is she not? The one who single-handedly held off the Vorthan fleet at the Battle of Crimson Nebula? Nyx Ra's mental voice carried lazy amusement. Tell him I could do it again if necessary. She says she could do it again if necessary, Jake translated, then added. But she's retired from active combat. She's more of a strategic advisor now. I am not retired. I am tactically repositioned for optimal human warming. She's not retired, Jake corrected. She's tactically repositioned for optimal human warming. The ambassador's crystalline form seemed to shimmer with what might have been diplomatic confusion. I see. And this arrangement works for both of you? It's surprisingly effective, Jake said. She gets unlimited ear scratches and a warm pillow. I get the most terrifying bodyguard in the galaxy who also doubles as a space heater. Win-win. Nyx Ra's purring intensified, a sound that made the room's crystal fixtures vibrate slightly. The ambassador took a step back. That sound, he said nervously. Oh, that's just purring, Jake said. She's happy. When she's unhappy, the sound is completely different. Or explosive. The crystalline one fears me. Good. She says she likes you, Jake lied smoothly. That's why she's being so quiet. The ambassador's harmonic tones shifted to relief. How diplomatic of her. So about that trade agreement, Jake said, pulling out a tablet. The dragons have one additional request. They want to establish a cultural exchange program. Cultural exchange? Turns out they're fascinated by human entertainment. Specifically, cooking shows and nature documentaries. They want to trade some of their historical archives for access to our media libraries. David Attenborough is a treasure that must be protected at all costs, Nyx Ra added seriously. She says David Attenborough is a treasure that must be protected at all costs, Jake translated. The ambassador's form flickered with what might have been amazement. The most feared warriors in the galaxy watch cooking shows? The Great British Bake Off is apparently the most popular show on Zephyria right now, Jake said. There's an ongoing debate about whether Paul Hollywood's criticisms constitute acceptable battle challenges. His judgment is fair but harsh. I respect this. She respects Paul Hollywood's judgment, Jake added. The ambassador paused, his harmonic tone cycling through what sounded like disbelief. This is not what I expected when I was briefed on this mission. Nothing about this situation is what anyone expected, Jake said. But it works. The dragons are happy, the galaxy is peaceful. And I've learned that intergalactic diplomacy is basically just figuring out what everyone actually wants instead of what they think they're supposed to want. And what do the dragons actually want? Jake scratched behind Nyxara's ridges again, earning another rumbling purr. Same thing everyone wants. To be understood, to be respected, and to have someone who'll watch cooking shows with them without judging. Also ear scratches. The ear scratches are crucial. Also ear scratches, Jake added. The ear scratches are crucial. The ambassador was quiet for a long moment, his crystalline form reflecting the light of the three moons outside. Finally he spoke. Commander Murphy, I believe this may be the beginning of a new era in galactic relations. As long as nobody tries to take away their baking shows, Jake said. Because that would end very badly for everyone involved. There would be fire. Much fire. She agrees, Jake said. There would be fire. Much fire. The ambassador's harmonic laughter was like silver bells in a gentle breeze. I believe I understand now why the dragons chose you as their leader. I'm not their leader, Jake said. I'm more like their interpreter and professional ear scratcher. And heat source. Do not forget heat source. And heat source, Jake added. Apparently I'm very warm. As the ambassador left with the signed trade agreement, Jake settled back into his recliner. Outside, the three moons of Zephyria cast their light over a world that had found peace not through conquest or domination, but through the simple revolutionary act of actually listening to each other. You know, he said to Nyxara, 6 months ago I was just trying to avoid getting eaten by dragons. And now you are professional dragon furniture. Life is full of surprises. Professional dragon furniture, Jake mused. I wonder what I should put on my business cards. Jake Murphy, diplomat, negotiator, and acceptable pillow. This covers all your qualifications. Jake laughed, a sound that mixed with Nyxara's purring to create something that might have been the most contented noise in the galaxy. I think I can live with that. Good. Now be quiet. The new season of MasterChef starts soon, and I wish to judge their knife skills. Your wish is my command, O terrifying dragon overlord. I prefer, O magnificent dragon overlord. But this is acceptable. And so Jake Murphy, the most unlikely leader in galactic history, settled in to watch cooking shows with the most feared warrior in the known universe, while outside their window, three moons watched over a galaxy that had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the best way to solve problems is to make sure everyone gets their ear scratches.